The release of the Nintendo Switch 2 was an interesting time, to say the least. Perhaps one of the most anticipated consoles of all time began to amass controversy after controversy until even those in my day-to-day life were confused on what was happening. I heard people warning others that all games would be $90 and that if you got one pre-owned, your Switch 2 would immediately brick itself. Nevertheless, I don't think these controversies will be Nintendo's biggest issues at all, but rather something far more intrinsic to the console. And its launch title is a perfect example. So today, I'm going to give a brief review of Mario Kart World, and then tie it into a larger point. Hey there, I'm Carno. Come to think of it, you'd think I learned my lesson not to make predictions centered around Mario Kart, but oh well. Firstly, a quick review of the game. It certainly had a tall order to fill. You arguably had the definitive Mario Kart experience with 96 different tracks to race on. So how is a sequel supposed to follow it up? Well, the two main responses the developers had were expanding the trick system and making it open world. And while it certainly succeeds in making a unique entry, I would not say the experience is consistent. Firstly, the trick system is a double-edged sword, because it greatly expands the gap between casual and frequent players. Of course, anyone who consistently plays a party game will have an advantage over others. But Mario Kart has always been different because, unlike Mario Party or Smash Bros., it's extremely easy for anyone to understand what is going on, even during its more absurd moments. And while those who knew the course layouts were likely to win, it was just as much because of the newbie's mistakes as the other's proficiency. Here though, even if a normal player goes an entire race without any major mistakes, they will still be at a disadvantage to anyone who knows about trick shortcuts, which are a much larger component than simply skipping a hairpin turn. Now of course you could choose not to utilize the system, either in multiplayer or at all, but that's an entire mechanic of the game you're choosing to ignore. Additionally, you still run into the other issue. I won't go into a ton of detail about the open world because there isn't a lot that hasn't already been said. Of course, the intermissions are the low point of any race because there typically aren't too many obstacles outside of basic traffic, and the map is little more than a straight line. In addition, when you actually get to the racetrack, there's only one lap to enjoy before the next long stretch of road. Even when it comes to the racetracks, I didn't find them as memorable as the ones from other entries, probably because they don't get as crazy with their ideas. They mostly exist within a cohesive world with semi-realistic restrictions, so they couldn't take place in a giant pinball machine, or on a ribbon weaving throughout a playset, or even within the pipes of a bathroom. In fact, all the best tracks here separate themselves from the overworld somehow, whether it be gliding onto a mountain for Bowser's Castle, launching into the clouds for the Great Question Mark Block Ruins, or driving up the cliffside to Sky High Sundae. Whereas Acorn Heights starts out promising with you climbing a giant tree, but then immediately disappoints when it drops you on the ground to loop back. Compared to Maple Treeway or Wild Woods, which both also have forced themes, it's the weakest of the three by far. There are some exceptions to this rule, like Cheep Cheep Falls, but for the most part, things feel almost a bit too grounded in some kind of consistent reality. Plus, driving on water, while fun at first, often doesn't give the same enjoyment as one might expect. Originally, water was a hazard that needed to be avoided. Eventually, it became possible for you to dive under it, offering not only a change in gameplay, but an expanse in scenery potential. While it took away some possibilities, it gave some new ones in return. Now with water skiing, you get neither the utilization of water as a hazard, nor the opportunities of underwater courses. Koopa Troopa Beach feels like a pointless addition because of this. Its one serious point of challenge no longer exists, and Peach Beach is hardly better. Sure, the drive through the town is plenty charming, but 2 of the 3 laps here are somewhat mediocre. However, I don't think it's an issue that could be easily solved. Because you're driving across the entire world, you'd either need to use the current system, or selectively choose which areas were hazards and which weren't. So the open world limits the design of courses not just directly, but indirectly too. Even the battle mode stages are placed in the same map, so more wacky concepts like Pipe Plaza or the DS don't make an appearance. Despite all those issues, however, I still had a good time with Mario Kart World. The new racing physics are refreshing, the animations are stellar, and the 24 racer cap means there's always some type of shenanigans happening. My favorite aspect has to be the Knockout Tour. More than free roam or intermissions, this idea justifies the seamless map. Whether playing by yourself, with friends, or online, it's a thrilling time. Sure, it can get pretty frustrating when you're front running for 8 minutes only to get hit by items and lose in the home stretch. But conversely, racing through a checkpoint just in time gives me a rush like nothing else in the game. Plus, the soundtrack is unreal. There is something for any type of mood you're in. So with my brief opinions laid out, can I recommend Mario Kart World? That's a tricky question. Obviously, if you bought the Switch 2 at launch, you've most likely made that decision already. But in general, I struggle to do so because at $80, the game not only has to justify itself, but also provide an equal or better value to 8 Deluxe with its expansion. And I just don't think it can do that. I mean, for just $5 more, you're getting triple the courses, the quality of which is often equal or better, a superior battle mode, and nearly all the same multiplayer fun. So I'd only get Mario Kart World if you've already played 8 Deluxe to death like me. Even then, I'm going to pull this out by default since it's an exciting new game, but as time goes on, I see myself playing it for Knockout Tour and then switching back to a more traditional experience. Perhaps that begs the question of whether a sequel should aim to replace the original, but that's a topic for another time. That leads me into the real point of this video, because I foresee that Mario Kart World will not be an isolated case. I'm not going to give you the full history lesson again, but in short, Nintendo for over 20 years focused on providing unique experiences you couldn't get anywhere else. Leading up to the DS, of course you'd buy Nintendo consoles for the exclusives, but the declining sales showed that Mario and Zelda alone wouldn't solve their issues. So they switched gears. For 3 generations, each game leaned into the unique identity of the console, whether it be motion controls, a touchscreen, or gamepad. You could even argue they gave the best reason for making their games for specific hardware instead of putting them on PC. Yes, emulators exist, but they often aren't the same experience. The Switch, however, was much closer to its surrounding hardware. When anybody would port something to the Switch, there was often a question on how they would adapt it. Nevertheless, the console was so successful that almost any port was worth doing, as testified by its enormous library. Many series saw their definitive release here. Even new entries took advantage of the situation. But herein lies the issue. With the Switch 2's backward compatibility, it already has the first console's library available to play. So that means that especially in Nintendo's case, they'll have to convince you that not only should you buy a new entry, but pay a higher price for it too. That goes double for their tactic of upgrade packs. Let's talk specifics here. I've already discussed Mario Kart World and its challenge against 8 Deluxe, but what about Mario Party Jamboree? Would you seriously recommend someone get the upgraded version for $80 or the standard version for $20 to $30 less? Would you advise someone to get the higher resolution version of Pokemon Legends ZA? Well, I suppose the real question is whether you'd recommend that game at all, but I digress. Or here's an interesting thought. What could they add to a hypothetical Mario Maker 3 that's such a feature you'd recommend someone pick it up over 2? Especially if it costs significantly more. To me, there are a few answers to these questions. Firstly, if you have already played an entry on Switch 1 and are itching for more, you'll probably get the new game. Second, if it's a Mario, Zelda, or even Smash Bros, people will buy it regardless. And finally, the Mario sports games could take the opportunity to redeem themselves. But to your everyday family, they'll likely just see one game that's $60 or less, and one that's $70 or more. To be clear, I'm not trying to paint a picture of despair here. Nintendo's ship is far from sunk. but this will be their challenge going forward. To sum up the problem, if someone were to ask me right now whether they should get a Switch 1 or a Switch 2, I would recommend the first one. The people who the new gen is currently appealing to are the same ones who find Kirby Air Riders to be worth the price of admission. Over time, Nintendo will likely provide more motivation for the common man. Donkey Kong Bonanza, while not exactly my taste, is still a good start. But I predict this shift in strategy will pose a somewhat unique difficulty for Nintendo. They're the talk of the town now, without a doubt, but it'll be up to them to keep it like that. At least for now, we can purchase the Hello Kitty Island Adventure upgrade pack. I don't know what I would have done without it. Until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.